1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and the book of John was written after 70 AD. The book of Revelation was written before 70 AD because the inside information tells us that he says, seal not this one and seal this one, and it is shortly to come and it's right at hand. And so if you work through that, you will understand that the book of Revelation was written before the final destruction. And if you go into history, Irenaeus was the first guy that actually said that the book of Revelation was written in Domitian's time, which is not. And in the time of Nero, Paul was beheaded, Peter was hung upside down, and John was thrown in a cauldron of oil and then sent to Patmos. Now, why this is important to know, because when Jesus came, he said, the light has come. The true light that comes into the world is now here. It's the fullness of times. It's the climax of the ages. And then he came to bring the kingdom. And in Matthew 11, he says, well, the kingdom is taken by force. They didn't accept it. The law and the prophets were until John. And now the law and the prophets appear again. And they meet Christ on the mountain, Moses and Elijah. And they reveal to him his exit. And what he does on that mountain, he chooses us. And because just before he went, he says, you have not chosen me, I have chosen you. So now the kingdom can only come with death and resurrection. And just before he went, he said, guys, work while it's still day, the night cometh. When did the night come? The night when Judas ate the sop after the bread was broken. He ate the broken bread and he still went on to do what he wanted to do. And that entered the day of darkness, of vengeance. Amazingly, that the book of Revelation calls it the wrath of the Lamb. And then the lion roars. So he's back to being the lion. Come on, the lion became the lamb. It's the same person. This is the same as the Father and the Son is the same person. God himself provided himself a lamb. So it is very interesting to know these things. So there was a day of darkness. Now, Psalm 110 tells us about the womb of the morning. And this day of darkness is actually the womb of the morning, because principles are set in Genesis 1. And the cycles is, it is evening and morning and day. Evening, morning and day. So the evening was literally, midnight was literally when Christ was crucified. They didn't receive their day. And now it was a day of vengeance, of darkness, where only Zion, the remnant that came forth, the church was born. This is why he says, Zion, I will make my habitation. Now this is where we read, and he says, brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment which you had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which you have heard from the beginning. So if we go to these books that were written after 70 AD, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, we'll see that he has a better perspective, because the later you live in life, the more revelation you can have. As time goes, revelation grows. So we are so privileged to live in this time. But listen to what John wrote here, and he said, the old commandment is the word which you have heard from the beginning. Again, a new commandment I write unto you, which thing is true in him and in you. You know, there was a time when I thought, why don't we just chuck the Old Testament? Till you realize, no, man, that's your foundation. Jesus came, he said, I did not annul the law. I fulfilled the law and the prophets. So it is one work, building on top of each other, progressing towards the purposes of God. And we cannot just throw pieces in the Bible away. Everything is there. But now, clearly, he says, it's a new commandment, but it's the same one as from the beginning. It's not new. It's new. It's not new. Because he says, this thing is true. I write to you because it is true, because now it is in you and it's in him. So we know that the law was added. Now, to understand all this, we have to literally go back, because it is all to do with light and darkness. The very next verse says, because the darkness is past and the true light now shines. So the true light came, but they didn't receive it. He came to his own killed him. He came into the world didn't know him. Then he said, work while it's day, the night cometh. So there was a day of darkness, which is called the day of vengeance. The day when the ground that cried for blood got answered. It was like Jesus paid the price with his blood, but everybody that didn't receive him. Now we have to understand, why didn't they receive him? Why was there this day of darkness? And then we can go right back to the beginning. Because in the beginning, God said, let there be light. And in the middle of creation, the climax of days, 4,000 years after Adam, not 4,000 years after the beginning, 4,000 years after Adam, the true light now comes in. So we need to understand days and seasons and years. So we actually have to go right back to the beginning. The first chronological verse is 1 John, there it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. So what he's actually saying, God is with God. So if you go back to Genesis 1, in the beginning, God made heaven and earth. Wow. Then we pick it up in Isaiah, which is written, it's a prophet that wrote just before they went to Babylon. And he said something in the last chapter. He's speaking about the prophecy that's going to happen when the true light comes. He says, heaven is my throne. So from the beginning, heaven was the throne. Earth was the footstool. And then he says something crazy. Where is my rest? Where is the house that you will build for me? And where is my rest? Now, the beginning and the end is one unit. God says, I am the beginning and the end. Not I have a beginning and an end. I am the beginning and the end. So if you go to the beginning, in the beginning he made heaven and earth. Heaven and earth co-created, but earth was dark and void. So here is heaven and earth, two realms. And heaven is the throne room, and earth is the footstool. So heaven is the offices, and earth was the garden, where it's like, come on guys, Lord is the husbandman, the Father is the husbandman. Jesus came and he said, I am the vine and my Father is the husbandman. And he says, the husbandman waits patiently for the earth to receive the former and the latter rain. This is why you have to read everything in a whole. But now my problem with this whole thing is, he says in Isaiah, where is my rest? And Isaiah 46 verse 10 says, the end is determined from the beginning. So let's look at the first day. After heaven and earth was created, God created a perfect day. But the perfect day was created in 7 periods of times, which he calls a day, because we have no concept of spiritual time. Spiritual time is not natural time. So this is what makes the Bible so awesome. This is where spiritual is worked out in a natural language which we can understand. And we understand a day is a period. It has we started with morning, day, evening. But in the Bible it was evening, morning, day. So the principles laid down there is so perfect, because if we just look at the perfect day God created, it ended with rest. So if you analyze this day, you will see it started with light. He said, let there be light. And there was a division between light and darkness. He called light day, darkness night. Light day is a realm. Darkness is a realm. But day one is a period of time, but it's not a 24-hour period because time was only made on day 4. I have said it so many times, but it seems to me that we have to go over these things over and over before we realize what it is in order to progress in revelation. Come on, is this not how children learn? You sit for a month, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4. And it's like amazing if they come and they tell you 1 and 1 is 11, something has gone wrong. But I think this is where the church is. We haven't built on our revelation, but it's time that we understand what this wonderful word tells us. And the Genesis 1 is the principles laid down. So there is day 1, divide. Day 2, divide water from water. Day 3, divide land from sea and brings vegetables. Now, if you take trees and plants and vegetation, if you go back to Genesis 2, he explains to you how it is done. So Genesis 1, what he did, Genesis 2, how it's done. So we also know that there was a division between the vegetation. There was 2 trees. There was a tree of knowledge, of good and evil, and there was a tree of life. So this is all in that creation day. Now, day 4 is just amazing. It's like a new beginning, and everything changes. So we have from the beginning light, water, land, and now it starts with light again. And you're the sun and the moon and the stars were created. Now, what is amazing about this is that when time was created, it didn't kick in like we know it, because it is actually guarantees that were set in place. So in the beginning, God said, let there be light. And no other light was needed because the plants grew without any light. But here he comes and he says, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from night, not nights from days. So when we read in the Spirit, it overlaps, but he clearly says night and day. And let them be for signs and seasons and days and years. Okay, this is crazy. Can you see that in the principles that's laid down? He says there's going to be night and day. And then there's going to be signs and seasons and days and years. Can you see that he actually mentions day and then days? So these are different realms. And we need to go into this and understand it. So if you look at creation day, it was 3 days of preparation, light, water, land, and then 3 days of filling, light, water, land, and then there's rest. So if you go to the numbers, God is 3. So it's 3 plus 3 gives you 6. And then it leads into 7. We know that the number of man is 666. But God is 66. His work on earth is 66 because it's 3. But when man came in, something terrible happened. God created man, the final thing, and he said, it is very good. Everything is very good. And we know every day was good. But then he said, it's no good that man is alone. But as soon as there was a division in man, when the woman came from man, Satan put his claws in there. And what man actually did, he disturbed God's rest.